Hey, Connor, first of all, did you get some time with President Trump? And also, I know there's some Irish immigrants in the U.S. without status. What do you think should happen to them?
The Irish immigrants?
There's some recent Irish immigrants without status.
Wait, are we taking questions?
Taking over the podium.
Ireland and America, we are siblings. We consider America our big sibling. So it's important for Ireland to have be a peaceful, happy, prosperous country for the 40 million Irish Americans to have a place to visit, to come back to their home. So we wish for our relationship with the United States to continue, and we wish to be taken care of by the big bro. You know, the United States should look after its little bro, and that's how we feel.
How about the trade? There's some trade disputes between the U.S. and the EU, and how do you think?
We wish exemption.
We actually have some stuff that we have to do right now.
I will say, Connor is here to meet with the president. He'll be meeting with him later this afternoon. We couldn't think of a better guest to have with us on St. Patrick's Day. We're both wearing our green. This was not planned, but very festive. And as you know, I'll be having a briefing later at 1 o'clock, so we'll talk more about their meeting later. But he's going over to meet with some other administration officials. He's spending the day in Washington, D.C.
For sure.
So
I'm here to raise the issues that people of Ireland face.
Yes.
You know, and it'll be music to the people of Ireland's ears, because never on the main stage has the issues the people of Ireland face been spoke. You know, our government has long since abandoned the voices of the people of Ireland, and it's high time that America is made aware of what is going on in Ireland. What is going on in Ireland is a travesty. Our government is the government of zero action with zero accountability. You know, our money is being spent on overseas issues that has nothing to do with the Irish people. The illegal immigration racket is running ravage on the country. There are rural towns in Ireland that have been overrun in one swoop, that have become a minority in one swoop. So issues need to be addressed, and the 40 million Irish Americans, as I said, need to hear this, because if not, there will be no place to come home and visit.
Ireland is actually in a condition right now where it could be genocided right now by the aliens that are already there. The police have sided with the invaders against the patriots in country after country. And they'll say over and over and over and over, I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose my pension. I'm like, you do understand you are going to lose your job and you are going to lose your pension. And as you continue to do this, you will lose your life and your family will lose their lives. You are outnumbering us. You are helping, right? What am I supposed to do? Well, stop loading the buses. If you volunteer for the military to go fight Iran for Israel, you got to be out of your mind. You know what I mean? Or to go Ukraine or something. You got to be out of your mind. They're going to use that to kill you off, right? I mean, it's about 1/3 aliens estimated now in Ireland of the population. But keep in mind, the population that's actually Irish, many of those will be elderly people, women and children. So when you match up man to man, they're probably closer to parity at this point. And keep in mind, the men who are coming in, high testosterone, they're coming in, many of them as like tribal units, like a lot of Afghans there. A lot of Westerners don't realize that a lot of the foreigners who come in as like a tribe, like literally a tribe, right? They're here to replace us. All these people from at least 150 countries. Ireland, what's on the table now is whether or not Ireland gets genocided. That's whether or not you're sufficiently gone, it's there. You don't have the power to kick them out. You just don't. It's over, right? Ireland is basically bedridden, you know, and now they're, you know, I don't know, it looks like they're standing up, but what are they really going to do? The aliens are coming in still every day.
It does seem like there's race hate at the bottom of it. I can't think of a better explanation. I mean, there have been wars in Africa, you know, sort of every week for my entire life, and no one's saying we've got too many Africans in Nigeria, let's replace them with Indians or something. No one would even think to say that. But poor Ireland, which didn't really do anything wrong on the world stage that I'm aware of, is, I mean, in 100 years, there'll be, you know, a minority of Irish people in Ireland. That's a big change, and it's on purpose. How could anyone read that as anything but an expression of hate?
Eddie Hobbs, thank you for talking to me early on a Sunday morning in Ireland.
Yeah, not a problem, Liz. Good morning to everybody in New Zealand, or good night, I think, or good evening over there.
It is. It is a good evening. I wanted to talk to you, though, Eddie, coming out of that piece. There's some very, very harsh warnings in that piece to Ireland. But here's the rub, Eddie. What's happening in Ireland, what's happening in the UK, what's happening across Europe, what's happening in Belgrade, what's happening in New Zealand, it's all the same globalist playbook of oppression. And I think we have very many Irish New Zealanders of Irish origin. So I wanted New Zealanders to hear what you are doing there in Ireland. Let's just begin with what we've come out of. We heard that man say, Ireland is really a basket case. It's bedridden. It's on the cusp of being completely ruined by the immigration levels that you are having. And his words were, they come in as a tribe. They're here to replace us. And what's on the table right now is whether Ireland gets genocided. Is he exaggerating, Eddie?
Well,
Is that too far?
he's he is a bit extreme in his opinion and his joining the dots, but he's generally in the right direction in terms of the globalist playbook, which is what you're describing it as well. I mean, if you just go back slightly in time, when Ireland went burst in 2008 to 2010, we were taken over by the IMF and the Troika, which was the IMF, the ECB, and a few other kind of unilateral finance facilities to Ireland. But the reason that happened was that the Irish taxpayer was forced at the point of a gun, really, by the ECB.
Just break down these anagrams: the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the ECB.
The European Central Bank. Yes. Because we are members of the European Union, we were forced literally at the point of a gun, a financial gun, to bail out the huge amounts of money that French and German banks had placed into Irish banks to make money out of the boom in property in Ireland, which was directly related to the suppression of interest rates in Europe in order to bail out the costs that Germany had built up because of its reunification. So at a time when Ireland, if it had control of its own currency, would have been raising interest rates to head off a property burst, we were in the car going at speed with no brakes. Because the braking system was in Frankfurt with the European Central Bank, and it was just hitting the accelerator as fast as it could in order to keep Germany out of trouble. So this has been a significant problem for us. So what happened then was that when we came out of it, we went through our trough around 2013, 2014. As we were coming out of it, everybody thought, well, it was business as usual, except it wasn't. Because during the period of the bailout, what happened was the permanent establishment did a deal, in my opinion, with the globalists to become the petri dish for stakeholder capitalism, which, as you know, is the poison from the World Economic Forum. It basically is an attack on representative democracies all over the world, including in New Zealand.
But just explain stakeholder capitalism for those who don't understand it.
Stakeholder capitalism is a replacement for our democracies. The way it works is that you surround the government with a swarm of NGOs, non-government organisations, and the NGOs basically become the feed into the government. They surround it with policies, with papers, and so on. And these NGOs. They're financed by local taxpayer income, but also they have a huge amount of philanthropic money coming in from places like the George Soros's Open Society, the Gates Foundation, and other areas. So these create a policy bubble around your executive. And
there are two things I have to just take issue with you. It is not philanthropy. It's.
Oh, I know that. I'm well aware of it, Liz.
Yes, they are absolute psychotic people, Gates and Soros, and they have been using the term philanthropy, in fact, to ruin the world, to ruin our lives.
Well, this is how it's presented. Stakeholder capitalism is how it's presented.
Yeah.
And in England, for example, we have 36,000 NGOs getting $6 billion a year. And just from the Irish taxpayer alone, but about 13 billion overall. So the difference, which is 7 billion, is coming from other sources. So you can see the problem here. And a lot of this is completely unknown to the Irish public. And the reason for that is that when we then come along to COVID and lockdowns, the Irish fourth estate, which is all of the mainstream media, became captive to the state. So journalism died on Q1 2020. And as a consequence of that, most Irish people are completely unaware of even what questions to ask, whatever about the answers to those questions when it comes to everything that's going on. So back in 2013, 2014, the Irish senior civil servants were picked to become the secretaries to this new thing called Strategic Development Goals, SDOs, or SDGs. And these Strategic Development Goals, there's 17 of them, were adopted by a special council of the UN in 2015. All of that was under the handiwork of senior Irish civil servants, along with some Kenyans. And we then adopted all of these strategic development goals. None of this was in any political manifesto. It wasn't agreed by the Irish people, who predate the state by many centuries, and were unaware of it, and are completely unaware of just what's coming down the pipe as these globalists attempt to put their what I call a control grid in place. And this might sound like something dramatic to say to people that are coming upon this for the first time. And it took me 3 or 4 years to psychologically accept this, whatever about figuring it out, because it takes a huge leap to see it. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, because it's all there in open sight. The control grid will at the centre of it, you'll have digital IDs. Your digital ID will contain your carbon limits. That's all decided. Your central bank digital currency will program what you can spend it on. Your travel will be restricted through your digital ID. Your car itself can be closed down if it goes beyond a certain limit. So this grid is an open site. And when you see the satellite, Starlink and those going around being able to basically survey all aspects of the earth, every square inch of the earth, including every square inch of your activity, what you eat, how much beef you'll have, how many insects you're going to have. And we just put insects into the European food supply just a few weeks ago. And that's just another little incremental step en route. It's quite clear that the plan, whether it'll succeed or not, and that's the big question, the plan is to create totalitarian control of the world population, where you have complete transparency and surveillance at the bottom of the pyramid, and at the very, very top, at the very, very apex of all of this, where all of this is being decided and controlled, complete darkness and the wealth and the power. So if you can then commoditize that, you can turn that into a market, you will have the wealthiest market. People think that gold is the most valuable asset on the planet. Some people think that. Some people think it's technology companies. It's none of the above. It's slavery. It's serfdom. That's the most valuable asset. If you can commoditize the human population and then control it, you are now in control of everything. And representative democracy, all of the stuff the media go on with, all of the theatre between political parties, all of the policy manifestos, is just all theatre. It's bread and circuses. Behind it is the real power. And that's why we see with some considerable interest what's going on in the United States, which of course now is a counter-revolution against what they call the deep state, which is an agency of the powers that are behind all of this. That deep state is directly responsible for the military grade and speed and expertise of the psyops that we all went through during COVID, the speed at which people were deplatformed, the speed at which people got cancelled, the way the global platforms, the technology platforms were effectively bullied into, very quickly collapsed into complete acquiescence to state demands. All of that is now beginning to come out in evidence, as we can see. Whereas before it was deduction and speculation and some leaks. It is in evidence. And as a consequence of that, it is now quite clear that in 2020 to 2020 forward, and New Zealand was a very bad example, because you had Ardern over there, which is, she was a complete rabid member of that class.
Absolutely rabid, and a rabid Marxist as well, a rabid communist as well. Yeah.
So that meant we can now say with almost absolute certainty that the whole thing was orchestrated, planned. They'd tried it several times before. It went off. It went off absolutely perfectly well, to such a degree that the vast majority of the population in most Western countries is still in a state of what I call, I have in my own book, which I brought out recently, this thing called agnogenesis, which is a field of study in psychological operations and propaganda, which is a term for manufactured ignorance. People are living in manufactured ignorance and don't know. They don't know that they are actually still in a kind of a state of psychosis, even though, they're kind of psychological terms, but they're locked out of the information, especially if the mainstream media that they're consuming their information from is not giving it to them. And also, Liz, there's been a huge diminution in critical thinking, where people are engaging in debate between themselves, getting alternative views and coming to some collective wisdom, which we've done around firesides for thousands of years. That all stopped because, and I have that in the book as well, technology has created a situation where we're in these echo chambers, all of us, myself included, we're all in echo chambers, whether we want to admit to it or not, it's true. And we're simply getting streamed at. It's streaming we're getting. We're not actually engaging in debate. We're not engaging in critical thinking, which is a structure of type of thinking to where you try and get to the truth of matter, coming from the different viewpoints and extremes. The Socratic method goes back, to 600 BC and probably before that. It just died. And as a consequence of that, what we've got is
we'll just pick that up. We'll pick that up. I was talking to somebody about that the other day. The cradle of Western civilization is built on Plato and Socrates would walk through the markets and simply pose questions to the people to make them think. He didn't give the information. He demanded that people think through the answers to his questions. And this is exactly what you're saying. The media we have is utter brain mush. It doesn't demand anything intellectual at all. And then, as you say, they're streaming to each of us what we already believe. So we're not getting differing views. The algorithms set us up so we are in silos of what we believe. And so you're right, Eddie.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. Because of the captivity of mainstream media, and it is captive. I mean, if ancient Greece had mainstream media, Socrates would have been deplatformed. We'd have never heard of him.
Yes.
And then he would have been vilified, and he would have been marginalized and put to the side. And if that didn't work, he would have been institutionalized. I mean, that's what would have happened to him. By the way, eventually, even without mainstream media and all the rest of it, as you know, he was forced to take hemlock. And,
he was.
And sentenced to death by hemlock. So back to where we are. So as a consequence of that, if you look at, which your opening question was about, well, where is Ireland today? So in Ireland, we have a particular set of problems. They're not unique, but they are at a severe level. We have mainstream media that I believe to be, from a media perspective, the North Korea of Europe. So nothing's getting through. We have a political establishment that's completely captive to the globalists. We know that. It's there in drama. For example, in the middle of last year, Liz, there was a vote in the Irish Parliament to voluntarily opt into the EU Migration Pact, despite the fact that we had an opt-out by public vote when we voted for a thing called the Lisbon Treaty many years ago. And that went through by, I think, 7 or 8 votes. Every single independent public representative voted against it because the people were against it, but it was ignored because the government parties were taking their instructions from above. That, to me, was the most dramatic example of it. So what we then did was we handed over border control. Our border control has been handed over to a bunch of unelected bureaucrats in Brussels, giving us quotas. And we now know, I've done some interviews on this, that the actual expenditure that Ireland is now putting into the building of these centres to deal with asylum seekers and refugees, most of whom we know are economic migrants, coming into the country under false pretenses. That's more or less admitted now. But yet we're just taking them in. But the amount of money that's gone in has been masked and hidden. It was pushed through, of all places, the Department of Children and Disabilities, Integration, Diversity and Culture. They just extended the name of the department just to give, and then they pushed the budget through. So we think the total expenditure so far that's gone into this whole venture is about 10 billion. Which most people, again, don't know about because the mainstream media aren't covering any of this. It's verboten. Now, I say that Because like last year, for example, when I first went into do these open public meetings, did one in Cork, and we had a huge number turn out for Ireland. We had about 1,000 people turn out, and about 100 cars turned away for lack of parking space in a convention centre. And I'm doing 3 of those now again in March, April, and May this year to bring everybody up to date, because there's been so much change in the meantime. But the point was that in the run up to that, a number of mainstream media editors refused to carry any articles, any op-eds dealing with our membership of the World Health Organization, because I was trying to warn people what they were trying to do, which was to land the World Health Organization treaty, they call it an agreement, at the World Health Assembly in June last year. And
that awful pandemic treaty, it was so sneaky, so vile.
It's still knocking about, Liz.
It was medical tyranny, and they're trying to do it another way. We've got a hideous bill here in New Zealand called the Gene Technology Bill, and it allows forced jabs. It has the potential on our legislative books to allow forced jabs in New Zealand, and this WEF government, as bad as Jacinda Ardern, but covert, where she was very overt with her bullying, they bully covertly under the surface without telling us anything. This bill allows everything that was in the pandemic treaty to come in through another bill. They are so sneaky, aren't they, Eddie?
Yeah, well, they've mimicked that as well, by the way, just over the border with us in the island, in Northern Ireland. They brought in a similar rule that it allows the establishment basically to force you into an institution and inject you with whatever they think is necessary to save the public. And the extraordinary thing about that is that whole thing, is completely offensive to international law under the 1966 Political and Civil Rights rule that we all signed up to back in the day, which basically says that you cannot and must not, no matter what the circumstances are, we will never force people to take an experimental medicine without informed consent. And that was just completely ignored by many countries throughout the world. And that's what I'm talking about, the military-grade psychological operation that went snapped into place, and everybody was pulled along with it with very few exceptions, and we are now where we are. So that's extraordinary. And there was a ruling, by the way, you won't know this, but just within the last few, you probably don't know this, but within the last few weeks at the European the Central European Court for Justice and the ECB, the ECJ, and the ECJ ruled on a case of an Italian doctor, Professor Fraggese, took a case to say this mRNA vaccine we have in Italy, it needs to be taken down off the market. It's not fit. It's not fit, and I'm asking you to do it. And the court ruled you don't have any standing in this court because it's not up to you can't do that because you're a GP, and you have to undertake a benefit analysis, a cost-benefit analysis, a health benefit analysis on any medicine that you prescribe, and you also have to issue prescriptions for the vaccines. And you're responsible and accountable to your patients, so therefore you don't have a standing to tell us or to tell the Italian, the European Medicines Agency, you can't do that. And maybe they didn't mean to do it, but the consequence of that is that they have just removed, subject to litigating it through the courts, they've just removed the Nuremberg defence for all GPs in Europe. The Nuremberg defence being, I was only following orders. They've just removed it as a sidebar to another case. And I think that's very interesting because it now means that we can certainly say in Europe, and it can be used elsewhere, that did you know that GPs are now technically under law liable in Europe for the actions that they took in administrating these vaccines to their patients because they didn't allow informed consent. They were following orders. We all know that they were frightened not to do so, lots of them. And I mean, such is the scale of the people that fell into all of this that, we have to go after some of the leaders like Fauci, for example, and others, and including on a national level in New Zealand and Ireland. There's a number of people that need to face prosecutorial investigation, let's put it mildly. But the rest of them, really, we just need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We need some kind of a forum where people can come forward and say, I was fooled. I didn't realise any of this, and I just followed orders. and I'm horrified, and I'll never do it again. And because in Ireland, I can tell you that almost the entire political establishment, the entire medical establishment, with the exception of maybe a dozen doctors out of 24,000 licensed by the Irish Medical Council, the entire media establishment, with no exceptions, fell in line.
Yes.
And just fell in line. Everybody fell in line. And now that the counter-narrative, now that the facts are coming out, we're now engaged, we're right in the middle of Operation Cover-Up.
Yes.
And it's quite clear. And just it's a game of whack-a-mole now, trying to knock it down, because we've now thousands of studies coming out saying there's a problem here with the vaccines. The mRNA vaccines are causing, turbo cancers, clotting, all sorts of problems with we're seeing a lot of brain cancer, colorectal cancer, and of course autoimmune disease. And it's all clearly in the same timeline. It's in the same. It's temporally in the same position as the vaccines, and it's being tracked like that by people that have done the tracking on the statistics. It's all there. And I'll be pulling all this together in the talks that I'll be giving, and showing, exposing the propaganda and the psyops to those people that already kind of know some of this stuff. But we've pitched it, and when these are free open public meetings, by the way, Liz. So and I'm doing 3. I'm doing one in Cork, Dublin, and then in the middle of the country in a place called Athlone.
Eddie, let's get to your talk that you're going to give, because what intrigued me when I wanted to reach out and talk with you was fancy just taking the initiative, thinking it all through. Clearly, you've done your research, but thinking through these important questions that you're going to put to your audience. Before you do that, tell us your own background. Who is Eddie Hobbs, and where have you come from, and how have you done all this?
Well, I mean, I suppose, sorry, just a quick sketch in my background. I came up through the financial services area here about 25 years ago. I was asked to get involved because I'd been involved with the Consumer Association of Ireland for many years, 13 years or so, as a voluntary director, and I was taking on the banks and the insurance companies, and quite successfully taking them down for anti-consumer behaviour. So they asked me then would I get involved in doing a financial programme, which I did. We won some awards for that, and then I did a kind of a blockbuster programme which I wrote and presented to a live audience over 4 hours, four 1-hour slots. It was called Rip Off Republic. It was 20 years ago, and it completely took on the way Ireland was operating, joining the dots to the protectionism in the various sectors to explain why prices were so high. I described Ireland at the time as eating its young. And that the place was just run for the benefit of developers. And a few years later we went burst, as you know, and then things moved on from there. And when I did that program got the highest television audience numbers for any factual entertainment program on Irish state television. And that was the end of my career, really. After that, I was being corralled into narrower and narrower areas because the government then brought in an act which meant that from then on, no presenter could ever look down a camera again on Irish television or radio and actually give their opinion. They had to ask other people their opinions. So at the time I was co-presenting the Consumer Show, and I was joking that I'd have to run around the opposite side of the table and ask myself a question and then go around and give the answer. So
that's Orwellian. Can you send me a link to that show or those shows? We'll put that underneath.
Sure, I can, yeah. So, I mean, the Rip-Off Republic, one of the things that it did was it forced the Irish government to collapse an agreement that had been in place since 1987 to create a protectionist film around groceries in Ireland, where small retail shops, where basically shops were being protected by making it illegal to pass through any discounts they would get from manufacturers to consumers. And it was just crazy, but when in hindsight. But just before I did the program, one of the major retail companies was taken to the Irish High Court by the Director of Consumer Affairs for passing on discounts that they were getting for nappies to young mums. So this hadn't really reached the mass audience until I put a nappy in my hand on the screen in front of hundreds of thousands. I mean, we hit over 1 million at the end of the day, viewers. We had 56% of the national viewing audience. And as a consequence, the government then attacked me personally for the next number of weeks before they kind of ran off the field because of the public reaction against them. So a lot of things happened, and that then brought me into, you know, this whole area. And I've been at it ever since, I suppose. But then when COVID came around, I knew that there was something seriously amiss, because there was absolutely no economic analysis on the effects of lockdown. So I got one major piece into one of the national newspapers, and that was it. The shutters came down, and I could feel them coming down. It was silent banning. You know, I was now subject to a fatwa, and I could feel it. And so that started my investigations, and I was just investigating what was going on the media side when I discovered that the civil servants were leaking what government policy would be the next day to the Irish Times, who were putting it on their front pages, speculative pieces, when in point of fact of just straightforward leaks. And then the main broadcaster would pick it up, as it says in the newspapers, which would then drive the radio and the national conversation all day long, at which stage the government politicians could then get a sense of the public reaction to whatever else they were going to do next. And this was I knew then that was the end of journalism. I mean, they were completely captive. And then my next event.
They're not journalists, Eddie. They're propagandists. They're Goebbels level propagandists.
They don't quite see it like that.
If they look at China and they look at the mainstream media in China, that's what they are. They simply spout what the government tells them to spout. It's a total betrayal of journalism.
In my talks, I'll be focusing on two of those in an Irish context, and showing where their funding is coming from, which is from the same sources, you know.
Wow.
So, I mean,
can you name them here, Eddie? Can you name them? Here?
Well, I prefer to just look. I'm going to be revealing that on Thursday evening next in Cork, so I'll just keep that one up my sleeve, because I don't want them to get advance notice of it until it's too late.
Great.
So but if you just take it globally, we already know, for example, that USAID was financing $500 million a year to an organisation to attack any counter narrative anywhere all over the world. And it involved like thousands and thousands of, I think 90,000 media broadcasts throughout the world in various countries, going on the counter narrative. So this is where newspapers were getting money basically from the American deep state to follow its orders.
And the BBC, Andrew Bridgen told me the BBC was getting money.
Yeah, there wasn't. I can't see who wasn't getting money, and so therefore, what happened to me then was I was asked to come along and chair a meeting that was taking place in a doctor's house involving a number of senior medics, an actuary, and a few other statisticians, and a few others. Would I come along and chair it? So I said I'd come along, and I went through the door. I have this in the book, by the way, called Breaking Totalitarianism. It's free. It's free online. It's a free ebook. And
where can people get that, Eddie? I'd like to get a copy of that.
Well, I can give you the link, but I mean, if you go onto my profile on Twitter, on X, it's there. It's just, you just go hit the link and away you go, and you can download it free onto your phone. Now, you can also buy a copy, hard copy, if you want to, but you don't have to. You can just get it free onto your phone. Or
I'd recommend everybody buys a hard copy so that it helps you to keep doing this important work you're doing. So let's put that out there.
You can also get an audio copy, Liz, and you can develop a cultured Cork accent. A cultured Irish accent over 11 hours, not to be recommended unless.
I'll do that, Eddie. I think I can do a little bit of Irish myself now.
So what happened? I walked into the room, and they're there, doctors, and they're shaking hands, and their kids are running around and hugging each other and saying hello, and then I realized, and I was deeply uncomfortable, and then it was a light bulb moment. I realized I'm in a state of hypnosis here. I'm the one with the problem. And it was that moment then that really got me going then. I spent a few hours, going through that session with them. And I said, my God, the scale of this thing. And then that started me off. And I started to join the dots, as I usually do, looking at the interconnections between things. And 3 years later, then came to the absolute certainty that all of this is before what we now know from what's going on in America, that clearly all of this was an orchestrated military-led, at military-grade expertise globally. That it was true. It wasn't just conspiracy. It was true, and here was the evidence. And now it's pouring out as well. Because I mean, that's what the whole attack on the deep state is. That's the essence of it. And it's not just about COVID. COVID was just, for me, COVID was a runway to land the World Health Organization treaty. They were both connected, and they nearly got it over the line. And the pivot moment for me was on the 1st of May last year, when the 49 US Republican senators wrote a letter to Biden and told him under no circumstances can you sign that treaty, that agreement, because it's completely offensive to US sovereignty. And then I knew that the big beasts had come out, finally stepped over the line. I knew then that the WHO was in serious trouble. And now, of course, they have the USA exiting, and they've got a number of other countries on the exit door as well, and at the exit door. So this is very serious. But remember, the WHO, as you know, Liz, is just one of their agencies. It's not the only one. You have the World Economic Forum, and of course, you have the UN itself.
Which is terribly corrupt. And our former Prime Minister, Helen Clark, was wanting to lead that. I mean, she also was a mentor to Jacinda Ardern. So we've been in real trouble in New Zealand, really right at the heart of the UN corruption in a way.
Well, this is the world that has been built around us. The problem now is that unlike the last century, when you had you had it in Soviet Union, you had it in Germany, you had it in Italy, you had it in Spain, fascism, you had it in China. None of these people had access to the technology that is now available to actually enslave the world. People think that, we have technology, sure, I can see what's going on. You don't realise that the thing it's like jiu-jitsu. It's been completely turned around. There's been a complete collapse in critical thinking, diminution in critical thinking globally. People are policing themselves, putting ourselves in our own prison. We can't talk about that.
Yes, please. I mean, I think this is the thing we want. We do want the president of America, and we want the others in the administration in whom we may put some hope. We have to keep being cynical until they deliver. We must not ever give our power away. But beyond that, we must remember, Eddie, we are powerful. And when millions of us stand up together, these few, I call them the parasite class, they're not elites, they're parasites. These parasites will absolutely collapse and run away in horror like the bunch of cockroaches they are. But it takes us as the people of the world to stand together. We are millions, we are many, and they are few. They are pathetic bullies, and bullies are always cowards.
Well, except all that, I mean, totalitarian regimes always collapse once they run out of enemies that they can burn at the stake. Wipe out in genocide, because that's where it ends up. I mean, if you look at Staunton's 10 steps to genocide, which is a study on it, if you take the Enabling Act period, the false flag event in the Reichstag, then the Enabling Act 1933 in Germany, like it was 10 years later, really, before the actual, before they were turning on the ovens. And so there's 10 steps to genocide. And this is studies, proper studies, not just people like me talking about it. I mean, it's properly studied. We were on step 4 or 5. We were on our way. As soon as we started to demonize the unvaccinated, treating them like lepers, once you're halfway up the ladder there, and at the end of it is genocide. So what happens with totalitarian regimes is they tend to just they want total control. They're not like authoritarians or tyrants, because once they get their control, they begin to mellow a little bit because they've got what they wanted. Totalitarianism is total. And if you back off, this is very important, the point you're making, if you back off against totalitarian machine, they don't back off. They will come for you and take everything you've got, because that's what totalitarianism is. And that's what makes it so goddamn dangerous. And particularly given the fact that the mainstream media globally is captive, and not doing its job, and using tropes to try and diminish the counter-narrative, the stuff that we're talking about. And also people themselves are in a state of manufactured ignorance. They don't want to wake out of it, because the enormity will then mean, which is my challenge at the end of the meeting, is to try and get people to understand that if we don't individually stand up, if we don't stand up, If we say, well, yeah, I'm all for that, and I'll send a few tweets, and I'll clap, but I'm not going to get active on it. If we don't act collectively, if we leave it for the next person, or for loudmouths like me and you, or whoever as we might be deemed to be on it, let them sort it out. I'll just get on with my life. That's not going to work. That's what they're relying on. It's just not going to work. And we'll all end up, your freedom, your capacity to give up your freedom as easily as you're prepared to do it for some convenience and technology is actually my freedom you're giving away, and vice versa. So we all have to stand up. And if we don't stand up, Liz, we're going to lose this. That's the point. We will lose it. And the scale of power and money and organisation we're up against is absolutely vast. But it's a rotten door, and it can be kicked in. But it can't be kicked in unless people come up and kick it, and not just clap on those that are saying, well, I'll do it for you, because that's not good enough. It's just not good enough. And I can tell you over here, the way the political antennae work is that as soon as the political establishment feel that the people are changing, there's a shift in the wind, they'll shift with it, because they lead from behind. But like the actual psychological step of rolling up your sleeves and getting something done locally, getting something done nationally, taking action, that's the only way through this. Because and we have a very short period of time. I mean, for example, as early as August, September this year, the European Central Bank is bringing in central bank digital currency. I was talking about this 5 years ago, and people thought it was nonsense.
This is shocking, Eddie. I have only just heard this. Tell us about this, because what happens in Europe will roll around the world like the cancer that it is. Europe is absolutely rotten under the EU at the moment, under Ursula von der Leyen, and they want to get away with this. So what's happening there?
Well, firstly, people understand that Ursula von der Leyen is a former trustee of the World Economic Forum. She sat as a trustee for many years. So she's an appointee of the WEF into her position in the European Commission. So they're bringing in central bank digital currency. Of course, the ECB is separate, but the ECB reports into the Bank for International Settlements, and Augustus Carstens, the head of the Bank for International Settlements, is quite clear. Central bank digital currency is about complete transparency over your spending, who's giving money to whom, where, and how, and completely subject to surveillance. And
yes, because when you say transparency, it sounds good, but what you're meaning is we have to be transparent while they tell us nothing. They again are in the dark, as you so beautifully put it earlier, while we have the lights of cross-examination shone on us all the time. Where is that money going? Why are you paying that? Who paid you that? How much? You cannot buy that steak because that steak uses too many credits. It's going to be total control.
You can have the insect burger instead, yeah. So what we now know is that it's coming in. The ECB will be the first of the major central banks to bring it in. Lagarde is, IMF, as you know, previously in the French government, then the head of the IMF, steeped in the IMF. And when she was appointed into the ECB, I raised my eyebrow. So, well, that's a very interesting appointment. That was a sideways move. Probably wasn't even her thought. I'm sure she was told to do it. That, in my opinion, I can't prove that, by the way, because it just makes sense. It's just pure deduction. So she's now she's accelerated central bank digital currency. She's delighted that Trump has been appointed in America, because that sets the American agenda to do it back at least 4 years. Which gives the ECB a chance to get in first with central bank digital currency. And of course, it'll be presented as fantastic. It's great for wholesalers. They can ship, they can do transactions much faster because they don't have to go through the banking system. They'll just deal directly with the central bank and settle their accounts through our currency. And of course,
so take us through it, Eddie. How will it work? When I hear CBDC, central bank digital currency, I immediately go to China, where if you do one thing that the Chinese central government doesn't approve of, they can simply close down your accounts. They can stop you having access to incoming money. Okay. You can be virtually hurled out of your access to money and food and survival.
Well, here's the way to understand it. At the moment, your money is created by your banks when they give out loans. People find this a bit confusing when they hear it for the first, but it's very logical. So that's how money is actually created. Money supply is created by credit. and banks give out loans. Those loans aren't subject to reports to government or anything like that. Yes, the banks are regulated and all the rest of it. Well, central bank, the banks themselves then, the individual banks, the commercial banks, the retail banks, they're all regulated by some sort of central authority. In most cases, it's the central bank of the country in question. In the European Union, it is the European Central Banks, the regulator of the banking system. So what they're now doing is they're bypassing the banking system by bringing in their own currency. So instead of money being created by giving out loans, money is created by some bureaucrat inside in the ECB pressing a button on a computer and saying, hey presto, this money now exists. And it can be set. So now you have the central bank itself producing its own currency, but it's subject to complete surveillance and control. So when you then link, as will happen, and now at the start this will be sold as this will be convenient, it's an alternative to the existing euro. It's going to go alongside it. It's really for those people that think this is a good idea to use. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's grand. Don't mind the conspiracy theorists and all that nonsense. This is just technology, and isn't it great? And of course, once you do that, once you link central bank digital currency to your digital ID, that's it. You're in the gulag, because all they then have to do is they can then start programming the currency itself. So the currency is digitalized, so they can program it. They can program it for your travel, for your vaccines, for your even down to fining you for breaches of free speech.
So explain how you mean programming. What do you mean programming it for your travel?
Okay, so say I'm the central bank, and you're now using my currency. And I don't like something you've just said, or the authorities with whom I network don't like you and what you're doing.
Or I want to have a second holiday in 10 years because I'm a slave.
I can take all of your money out of your account, or I can take some of your money out of your account, or I can stop you spending your money on travel wherever you want to go. I can dictate what you're actually going to eat, so that force you to be healthy. At the point of losing your capacity to just get around as an active citizen. So I
want to stop you there, because actually we will be sold that. This is a way to encourage people not to eat the bad food, so our medical costs will go down, they'll be healthier. To me, that's total rubbish. What they'll do is say eat crickets and eat the insects, while they, the parasitic few, eat the beautiful produce of the land, the good meat. Human beings are not made to eat insects. We didn't evolve that way. We're not.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree with you more. But this is a psyllium, where the ultra wealthy, the oligarchy, the people at the very apex of all of this, and really, really, really right up at the apex. You reach what I call the black gates of Mordor. We can't open those black gates yet because people aren't prepared for what's on the other side. But I mean, there is an apex authority behind all of this. That's quite clear, because there has to be. It's just deduction, and anyway. I better leave it at that, because it's an area that's full of speculation and not a lot of evidence yet. But all. Do
you have an idea though, Eddie? I won't ask.
Well, listen. I think we all do, but be better off not going there, because it doesn't matter anyway. The fact is that this is actually happening. It's all about. I can tell you that the people are behind all of this. They're all into dynasties, protecting power, and protecting themselves from what they would see as the inevitability that the masses will inevitably come for them for the amount of power that they've accumulated, which is absolutely extraordinary, and the amount of wealth that they've accumulated, because that's human nature, that's human history. French Revolution all the ways back. To ancient Rome. Once you get an accumulation of power and money in a very small number of hands, and then you get corruption, you get oligarchy, you get interference with politics, you get all of that nasty stuff, goes on for generations. Eventually the masses go, we've had enough of this, and they go after them. And that's what they fear the most. So the way you stop that is you get ahead of the masses and you enslave them. And now they can't do it because you've got control of them. And that's what's driving it. It's self-preservation. Pure and simple. So, but back to
the CBDC, Eddie. Is that the world where we bifurcate then, so that you're my neighbour, and I have some cows, and you have some really delicious fruit that I want from your trees, and I say, Eddie, I'm going to have some meat available. Can I barter my meat for your fruit. Is that the kind of secondary
Well, when in a
economy we develop?
well, you see, it can't interfere with a barter arrangement, and it can't interfere with cash, but it can interfere where you're actually going to try and buy your meat with your digital currency, and suddenly
So we'll form a different world. We'll go on a different timeline. Those of us who are aware, won't we?
Oh well, exactly. Look, listen, we're out at the extremists here and saying, well, this is the direction they want us to go in. But I mean, what we're not dealing with is all of the challenges and obstacles that are going to be put in their path, including people waking up and doing something about it and saying no. I'm not going to take part in that. I'm not going to take part in my own enslavement. But the problem we've got is that the vast majority of the population is completely asleep to all of this. That's why in my talks I've asked people to bring along a nearly awake person, a NAP, an NAP, and by the time they're finished, which is about an hour and a half, or whatever however plus questions and answers, they're going to leave and they'll no longer be a nearly awake person. They'll be an awake person, and it's how you do it. I think you have to kind of just get people, bring them along and get them over the barrier. You can't just force this as like a lunch or a dinner of facts down their throats. It just doesn't work. Human brains don't work that way. You've got to bring them along with questions, bring them along with understanding so that they reach the conclusions themselves. And when they reach the conclusions themselves, it forms part of their belief system. Until then, it's just, that was a very interesting talk. Wasn't it very funny? And there's some frightening stuff there, isn't there? Yeah. And then the next morning they wake up and say, no, what's on television today?
Yes.
And then when it comes around to voting at the polls, they vote in the same clown that they voted in the last time, or the clown from the next political party that doesn't, where none of the parties are talking any of this language. Because
I didn't catch what your eureka moment was, but what was your wake up moment, Eddie? I know that you come from a background of questioning.
It was when the doctors and their families and when the people that I met in the room weren't social distancing, they weren't wearing masks. They weren't washing their hands. They were hugging each other and saying hello. And I walked in, and I was in a state of high anxiety in the middle of them, going, "What the hell?" And until I realised that they were all perfectly normal. I was the one that was hypnotised.
Yes.
In that moment, I realised, despite all of my analysis on the financial stuff, I was in a state of high anxiety and high alert, and I had been in that state for many months.
Yes.
And that's the moment I realised, my God, I said to myself, I remember vividly saying to myself, my God, you've been hypnotised. Myself. That was the moment.
I'll tell you mine. It was, I put out a love letter to New Zealanders saying, and I just opened it with a couple of things right from my heart. The whole thing was from my heart. But I said, Jacinda Ardern, you are my servant. I am not your servant. You've got this the wrong way round. I was being quite reasonable. I'm always very rational in the way I think. And then secondly, I referred to my own father who married late and had me late. But he was in World War II. And I said in this message, my father fought for us to have the freedoms that you are trying to take away, the freedom to say no to something in my body. And pushing a jab in my body is a version of rape. And I will not be raped. I will say no to that. I would rather die than be violated in that way. You will not push something in my body. Now, about a week later, I had a lot of emails from all of this. People saying, thank God you've spoken up. It's given me courage. Please keep going, Liz. I was in the middle of the night and I was answering those emails and the screen went dead, Eddie. And there was just a white arrow on the screen moving everywhere. Now, an Eastern European man was one of the thousands who'd reached out to me and said, Liz, if you need help with your computer with security, I'm an expert.
Liz, can you just go back to the start of that, Pegasus? Can you just go back to where you brought that in? I just think I might have missed that.
Yes, it was interesting you cut off at that point. Very interesting. Anyway, he said to me that he'd put in protection to cover me because it was a very serious program that had somehow got into my computer a week after I, as a mother, as a Kiwi mother, and yes, somebody who used to have a profile in legacy media, but hadn't been working there for years, as a mother had put out a message to Jacinda Ardern saying, stop this nonsense. You cannot force people to be jabbed. And within a week, this arrow went off in the middle of the night. The screen was black. There was only a white arrow moving. This Eastern European man said, you have got Pegasus, the program that can only be activated by one government to another, and it originates in Israel, and it's a Mossad program of spyware. And they had done that. This New Zealand government had put that onto my computer while through our legacy media, managing a brutal campaign calling me mad because I had used a metaphor saying that Jacinda Ardern caused New Zealand to shudder in horror because we'd had an earthquake when she was speaking. It was a metaphor. The metaphor was saying so many New Zealanders are horrified at the tyrant you are, Jacinda. However, why I raise that is the spying on us and the brutality towards us has been going on, for the last 5 years. We mustn't underestimate how serious this has been.
Yeah.
I won't have been the only one being spied on. And the fact that it went down as I was telling you that story, I sort of laugh at them because they're pathetic. I mean, they're pathetic spying on us. I've got nothing to hide. I'm just telling the truth. I won't be your slave. That's all I'm telling them. I'm a free being, and I'll die.
What's very interesting about that connection is that I recently interviewed Catherine Austin Fitz, and my opening question was, because it was around the time, I said, what's really going on in Gaza?
Yes.
What's really happening? As opposed to, we're going to rebuild Gaza and it'll be the Riviera on the Mediterranean, on the southern Mediterranean coast. And, like a real estate project. And her response was enlightening, to say the least. She said that that Gaza was flattened to rebuild it into the 15-minute city model, and it will be just blistering with Israeli technology for surveillance that is in place and ready to go, and that's what it's really about. And that made then perfect sense to me. That was the game plan all along.
Horrendous, and the lives, the mothers and children that have suffered.
No, that's opinion, right? I'm just passing on what she had said in the interview. But what makes Catherine Austin Fitz, what makes you have to stand up and listen to what she has to say, is that she was the Assistant Secretary for Housing and Urban Development in the Bush administration back in the day. She led a senior stockbroking firm on Wall Street for many years. She then set up her own. She now runs the Scolari Report. She now lives in Holland. She's an extraordinarily intelligent person, and on top of that, she has stated long before the counter-revolution in America now and USAID and all the rest of it. She had stated as early as 2015 that a total of $21 trillion, that's 10 years ago, had gone missing from the US books, because she'd been alerted to it in 1998 by a fund manager saying that they're taking the money now, they're taking it out of the country, and that had reached 21 trillion by 2015, and she now reckons it's somewhere between 30 and 40 trillion. That has basically gone walkabout into all of these nefarious projects through the cutouts from the CIA and the deep state across the world, 21 trillion by 2015. So an amount of money equal to the US national debt has actually been spent off the books, the black budget. And that's extraordinary. That's an amount equal to current GDP in the United States. That's the total amount of money and power we're talking about. So, I mean, that's a real wake-up call for those people that still think that some of this is reaching, because we now know that they're now going in looking at USAID is just the start of it. That's a cutout of the CIA. But once they get in, if they start to do an audit of the Pentagon, that it's going to get very serious, because the amount of money that's going to be revealed will be absolutely jaw-dropping, and power that goes with that. So when Zelensky says, well, yeah, you gave us 100 billion or whatever the number is, or 200, whatever the number was, but we only got half of it, he's probably actually telling the truth. It's gone. It never reached us. So where did it go? Who got it? And I mean, we already have examples of massive amounts of money, billions going to the US Navy for a ship that nobody can find. Well, where's the ship? Well, it was really just an imaginary ship, but it wasn't an imaginary amount of money. So I think we're just at the start of a very, very painful period and a dramatic period in world affairs for the next number of years, as a lot of this stuff starts pouring out. And
Eddie, could you send me the that interview? I'll put that underneath as well with Catherine Austin Fitz. She is an extraordinary woman.
Yeah, it's up.
I have it there. What were you going to say?
It's up on my YouTube channel, Counterpoint. It's the last interview I did. And
Great.
I've clicked on it as well. I'll send you the link though. It's not a problem at all. And so
Where else can people follow you, Eddie? So Counterpoint is your YouTube channel.
Counterpoint on YouTube. Yeah, I'm at Real Eddie Hobbs on Twitter, on X. I do some TikToks. And also, sorry, I set up a website called 1215 Tribes. 1215 was the year of the Magna Carta, when the absolute power of the monarchy was broken. So it's 1215 Tribes. So and that really is just putting up information that people can get. I'll be trying to expand that into a community-led item now, which is what the talks are platforming. It's all free. People can just register, and they can also, when you go on to 1215 Tribes, you can also sign the Killarney Declaration. Even if you're not Irish, you can sign it.
And what's that?
The Killarney, on the end of May last year, just on the cusp of the World Health Organization annual assembly in Geneva to try and sign this treaty, there was a global economic summit. It happened in a snap, announced for Killarney in the southwest of Ireland. And I said, and what really got my attention was that the opening speaker, the keynote speaker, was who else but Ghebreyesus, the chief executive officer of the World Health Organization. I said, that's very interesting. So I decided to go and utter a public declaration on behalf of the Irish people. We call it it's called the Killarney Declaration, and it joins all the dots. It's 13 minutes long, but it's very much along the lines of what happened in Ireland. We take declarations here kind of seriously since the 1916 declaration outside of the General Post Office in Dublin, which started the whole Irish, the last attempt to throw off tyranny in Ireland, and it was successful about 5 years later. So these declarations are kind of important. So it was really done along those lines.
Did that get good public traction, good public support?
It did at the time, yeah. It's been signed. It was physically signed by about 8,500 people. I'm trying to double that now over the next number of months.
Oh, good. We'll put that underneath. And you're saying even people in New Zealand who love and support Ireland, and there are millions of us here. Well, we're only 5+ million. But New Zealanders can support that. Is that right?
We're the same. We can swap each other's telephone books. They'll be the same size.
Yes.
So we can, if you go on to 1215tribes.com, you can sign the Killarney Declaration. It's the first thing it'll ask you to do, and it's just the start of something, So
I'll take you back just to that moment of being told that that I was now subject to surveillance linked into Mossad in Israel, and that the New Zealand government had done that simply because I put out a love letter saying I won't be jabbed, and New Zealanders, Jacinda's our servant. Don't let her tell us what to do. After that, I was up late, like you probably, many nights researching. And there was one particular morning, about 3 a.m., I got up to get a cup of tea, Eddie, and I thought, I'm going crazy. I really am going crazy, because I think the government wants to hurt us. I think their motivation is to hurt their own people. I think Jacinda Ardern is willing to murder New Zealanders. And that 3 a.m. realization changed everything in my world. And then I went back to the founding fathers whose writings tell us over and over again, never trust the government. You are not meant to trust the government. That's why we're writing this Constitution for America. And I realized that our schooling was so wrong. Everything starts to collapse and reorder itself once you realize the government is not our friend, and we must never assume they have the good of the people at heart. Is that for you too long a bow to draw, Eddie?
No, it's not. I believe that there are a small number of people that have knowingly and malevolently orchestrated, and executed the greatest deception in human history since the fall of Troy in the late Bronze Age, and brilliantly executed. But underneath them is a vast minion of managers, let's call them that, civil servants, public administrators, doctors, seniors in the medical profession, and the regulators and all the rest of it, that have just gone along without engaging in any. There's been a failure in 3 areas: a failure of critical thinking, obviously, a failure in morality, and a failure in personal courage. That has been the failure. And as a consequence of that, most people know they smell a rat, but they just don't want to see the rat. They want somebody else to deal with it. And that's where we are. But yes, there are people, I don't want to single out any particular person, obviously, that have recklessly gone along with it. You can clearly see them, those that have been through the World Economic Forum Young Leaders Group. Not all of them, but a lot of them, they've been infiltrated into governments throughout the world. There are people running NGOs that are fully aware of what's going on and are lobbying and influencing government and bullying them where they can. And then there are the garmless politicians that we keep electing that actually think when they go into the national chamber that somehow they're in where power is. They're not. They're in the theatre of power. The actual real power resides elsewhere. That's how the world has been set up, certainly the Western world. And that's what we have to dismantle. We are under the control of organisations that are way above the pay grade and intellectual grade of a lot of the people we elect into public office. Because people ask me all the time, well, why don't you go forward and get elected? And I'll say, because there's no power in our national parliament. What's the point? Yes. Well, then go to Europe. But yeah, but the Europeans have given it. It's much bigger than that. We have to collectively, globally get together and take it down. But it is there. It is real, and it has done this. But the number of people that have done it knowingly is tiny compared to the number of people that were just following orders. And now the same people cannot accept that they have been duped. That they opened the gates of Troy and allowed in the wooden horse. And because they did. And we can see it. I mean, I've interviewed, for example, I'd be using clips of this, Angus Dalgleish, Professor Angus Dalgleish, who's an oncologist, a virologist, and an immunologist.
Wonderful man. He came down to Australia and spoke. Actually, made a huge impact in the interview.
Yeah, I know. Well, he didn't have the same impact in the British Isles where he's from. He did because he's wonderful, and he's great clarity on it. And as you know, he's saying this thing has to be stopped. It's creating cancer. It's destroying the T cells. It's shattering the immune system. How can we continue to say that these jabs are okay when it's quite clear that this is the evidence? And all of that, so now that we're in a different situation now in 2025 than we were a few years ago, Liz, all of this information is out there now. It's all available. It's no longer a conspiracy theory, which was the trope. It's no longer people with their tinfoil hats on. It's actually subject to scientific study, and it's there in peer-reviewed journals. If you just need to put it together. So therefore, it's for now for a doctor, an individual doctor, or for medical regulators, or for senior politicians to say they didn't know, and they continue to allow these things to take place. You're way beyond the safe zone now because the information is there. Angus Dalgleish is just one of many. You can look at the Dennis Rancourt study with Hickey and Leonard from the middle of last year. I mean, that's absolutely jaw-dropping. And then you can look at the work of Edward Dowd in Finance Technologies, where he's gone in under the group life data and the Department of Labour Statistics in America and put it all together and basically come to the same conclusion as Dennis Rancourt and his group. And that's that COVID-19 didn't kill anybody. It was the response to COVID-19 that is responsible for the excess deaths. And
we had a database builder for the Ministry of Health in New Zealand, Barry Young, Eddie, who was building a paid per dose database for the government and seeing the deaths and seeing the horrors. And he waited until he had enough evidence to absolutely prove excess deaths. He went to a number of people who said, we'll do that in a couple of years, or put him off or delayed. And he came to me, and when I saw it as a journalist, I said, this is going to be really risky, but we must put this out now. So we spent 8 weeks. We reached out to epidemiologists around the world, including RFKJ's 2 leading epidemiologists, who looked at some of the data and said there's a 1 in 100 billion chance of this happening in New Zealand. And I'm talking 51 people in one town, all jabbed on the same day, dead 6 months later. Statistically, you can't say it's impossible, but you can say that's as near to impossible as statistics would allow. Now, when we put that out, Eddie, Barry's house was broken into and by the police, his door smashed down. He was roughed up. He was put in prison for 2 nights. And he is facing on the 5th and 6th of May a trial in which he could be put in prison for 7 years. He's so brave, this whistleblower. I was threatened with prison for putting it out. They've spent nearly $3 million trying to suppress this around the world. And it's just horrifying what they're doing when they know the excess deaths are there in the data and they're hiding it. It's the people's data. So I'm praying next month or in May, early May, that this will go around the world, and I'll send you the links for Barry's trial. But this is what they're doing everywhere. They're just trying to hold back the flood of information that is growing. In terms of your wonderful idea of getting out, I was going to ask you whether you'd stand for politics, because you seem like the kind of leader that Ireland needs. But I agree with you entirely. From my experience standing in the 23 election here, I realise if you do really well, which I think the little party that I started did really well, much better than the numbers we were given, I think they just take the votes off us. I think they give them away to other parties, and there is no recourse. When I went to the Electoral Commission with evidence of corruption in collecting the votes, they shrugged their shoulders. And I came away from that, Eddie, thinking politics is not the way. We must have a people's movement. It's the only way we'll take our power back. So in terms of you've come to that point as well? Well,
absolutely. Actually, do you know what? You're nearly putting tears in my eyes there, because you summarised it brilliantly. We must have a people's movement. Yeah. And that means everybody taking individual action and responsibility. It's only through collective action can we defeat it. The politicians, the political establishment that are there are going to be the last to convert, because they're in Operation Cover Up now. In Ireland, for example, it's almost impossible to set up a political party, and I was involved in trying to set one up about 10 years ago, so I can speak from personal experience, because of the rules that are set up to prevent you raising the type of funds necessary to properly fight politically as a new brand. It's impossible, and it has been made that way by the incumbents. So the incumbents have a permanent power base that's very, very. It's almost impossible to penetrate. It would take decades to do it. So what's needed is you have to get a people's movement together and kick in the door. It's the only way of doing it. I mean, kick in the door peacefully. I don't mean violence or anything like that. It's only then that the political establishment will shift. It won't shift because, just like the mainstream media, just like the regulators that were behind all of this, they're going to be the very last people to convert. And we know this as well by the works, for example, of Matthias Desmet in his work on the psychology of totalitarianism, where he said, well, look, 20% of the population will see through the scam like looking through a pane of glass and see it for exactly what it is. 60% will know something is significantly wrong but don't want to face it, keep their heads down because they're compromised, or they're concerned about their link into the public sector contracts, or they're reliant on public sector funds. And then you have the actual the hardliners, the 20-25%, which he said in the early period of the Nazis, they actually these were the people that are alienated and isolated, kind of aimlessly going through life, and suddenly they're given a cause, they're given something to get behind. In this case, it was masking and 2-meter rules and get back, you're not back, you're 2 meters, the COVIDistas. And you had one as Prime Minister of New Zealand, and they were the feedstock into the SS. That's the point that was being made. And even when Berlin was collapsing under Soviet attack from the east, they were still there fighting. Absolutely rabid Nazis, rabid SS. They were still in a state of hypnosis. And they died like that, many of them years later, still completely and utterly caught up in the psychotic event that was created by back in the early 1930s when Hitler manipulated the false flag operation in the Reichstag and blamed the communists, and then he got the Enabling Act through, and the rest is history. But that wasn't the only example of it. I mean, this has happened in many other societies as well. So for me, unless and until we can collectively get the information out there, get people to and understand that this is an omni-war. An omni-war means that it's happening, but you may not be able to see it yet, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. But it's affecting you, your family, me, my family, and my freedom and the freedom of my family is entirely dependent on your capacity to wake the hell up and to start getting involved in resisting this. And then it'll change. But until then, it's going to be touch and go.
But it's disheartening. I mean, we have a New Zealand actor who's done well in Hollywood, Sam Neill, and he did an interview in Australia the other day in which he said, I really miss Jacinda Ardern. She was such a wonderful leader, and I wish we had more Jacinda Arderns across the world. This man, Eddie, is sick with cancer. His body is breaking down with cancer, which we now, anyone who's done a modicum of research knows that turbo cancer is a massive problem of the fallout of the jab injuries and the jab poisons in people's bodies. And there he is saying, I miss my abuser. It is these people who are literally, there are people who are going to die still believing in the abuser who has caused their death, their premature death. It is so sad. So the awakening, let's get back to your wonderful talks, because this is where I really wanted to finish. Actually, two things I want to finish on. The questions you're going to put to your audience, if you can give us a taster of those. Secondly, actually, are you going to film those? Because obviously here in New Zealand, we would love to see those talks. And thirdly, Eddie, I want to finish on what keeps you going, on what faith, on what moral code you go by, because you have a very strong moral code, and I think it will give people steel in their spine to hear that. So, yeah, let's go to your talks. What questions are you going to ask?
Well, I'm going to rely on the bardic tradition, which is very much a Celtic thing, where the power was never with the king; it was with the bard, and the bard could the bard could wipe you out if you get on the wrong side. The bard, of course, was the poet and songwriter inside in the clan. So the bards had huge power, and the power of the king, the power of any administration, is entirely dependent on the respect of the population. Not its fear, its respect. And if you get people to start laughing at them, you use comedy, you use satire, you kick down the door 10 times faster than just hitting them with facts. So if you can make complete idiots of the people that are oppressing you, and the public start laughing at them. Once the public start laughing at them, it's game over. I've done this many times in my career on television, getting the public to actually hoot with laughter at their leaders and see them for what they really are, and then it's all over. There's no way back from that. Once and that happens time and again, because if you lose the respect of people and they start laughing at you, they find you a source of comedy or amusement, or and it continues on. There's no amount of political advisors that you can bring in to deal with that. It's finished for you. So I'll be doing that, and I'll be doing a montage of it, of the political leaders that we've had. Do
you know what that reminds me of, Eddie? It reminds me of Hamlet, one of my favorite Shakespearean plays, where actually King Lear is one of my favorite plays, where this king who is so full of hubris and ego and control and such a bully, and he is brought down through his own hubris. But it is the Joker who sticks with him. And it is the Joker all the way through that play that Shakespeare uses to show us that is where the wisdom is. The Joker, able to laugh at the king and show him what an idiot he ever was to think he could control and bully people and find love that way. And these people who are so empty, even BlackRock, that can't stop gobbling up the world, Larry Fink, he must be such an empty man inside him to have to do this. They are pathetic creatures, aren't they?
Well, I mean, to answer to get to the second part of your answer, to answer that just the point you just made, what drives that? Well, the answer, you're asking then for kind of what's your level of self-awareness, and it's always for me anyway. I'm always deficient in that area. But what I can say is that events have occurred in my life in the last number of years in the run up to all of this that in hindsight were interesting, and as a consequence of that, I did something I thought I'd never do. The book that I brought out, which is Breaking the Silence on the Return of Totalitarianism, or Breaking Totalitarianism for short, is dedicated to the champion of free will, and the opening dedication is to Archangel Michael, because I believe that the very apex on the other side of all of this are under a malevolent impulse. And that's where the Killarney Declaration ends. It says that, and it says, under God we signed this declaration, because what we're in here isn't just a contest for control of the enslavement of humanity and all the rest of it. You then are faced with the next logical question: is what drives those people on the other side to want this? What's creating the craving for it? Because it is not. It makes no sense to the rest of us. It doesn't until you begin to consider that they're different, that they're under some kind of an impulse that they just which is driving them. Just as our impulse is to protect our family and protect our freedoms and protect our ability for free speech and for critical thought and for the bonds of our community. I mean, they made an attempt last year, because this was all part of it. They made an attempt in Ireland to redefine family itself, and every single major political party said vote yes. And all of the commentariat in the mainstream media said vote yes, and the Irish people came out and overwhelmingly rejected it and threw it into
And
the bin.
what was that?
And
what was that? The vote yes or no to what? What was the question?
Firstly, they wanted to take mother out of the Irish Constitution.
Oh,
Mother. And then they wanted to make marriage about enduring relationships, not marriage. In other words, it's either marriage and enduring relationships were going to be on the same level. And everybody, all the wokes crowd, the progressive left, were behind it. The Irish public smelled a rat and said no. And that was the main pivot moment. And a few weeks later, the Prime Minister of Ireland, Leo Varadkar, resigned out of the blue after a return trip to the United States. He just resigned. And even his inner cabinet, his inner group didn't even know he was going to do it. Just resigned.
Because he didn't deliver what the World Economic Forum, his puppet master.
It would appear you could come to that conclusion very easily. It mightn't be. We can't prove that, but you could come to that conclusion in your head quite easily. So that to me was a huge source of energy, because I said, right, there's a thing called falsification preference in psychology, in group psychology, where people will say even vote in a particular direction, but it's not how they feel inside. It's not their preference. They're falsifying their preference. And that it can come as a major shock to political establishments that suddenly, out of the blue, as if out of the blue, the public rear up and kick in the door. And they say, well, where did that come from? How we didn't see where's the science, the data to support all that. But people feel this themselves. It's like it's a feeling among the population. It's just boiling. It's coming to the boil. And I think
we saw that with Trump. We saw that when Trump said make it too big to rig, and the American people did. They said we cannot stand the left anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, the Americans are ahead of us in doing that. But I can just say in Ireland, we have uniparty. We've two political parties that are like supposedly in opposition, but they're actually in coalition. And then we have the main political party that are actually worse than them, because the main political party, you may have heard of them, Sinn Féin, said that, well, if you don't give us a yes vote in the election, we're going to come back and ask you again. We'll just change the wording. So and that was the main political party. So therefore, when it came to the general election, which is only 6 months later, the Irish people, who predate the foundation of Ireland by centuries, had no political choices. And the newbies that were coming into the political system were facing all of the challenges that newbies do, and they got blown away. Because you can't. It's almost impossible to break through. It takes a long time, because the timing isn't quite right for the moment when the falsified preferences are revealed as nonsense, and people say, well, this is what we really think, and then there's action, and I think that will happen in Ireland eventually. But it's a slow boil, unfortunately, until we get there. But the good news from my perspective is that there's been a movement back to the centre again. People say, it's a movement back to the hard right. For God's sake. There's a movement back to the centre again throughout European politics. It's happened in Germany, it's happened in France, it's happened in Italy, it's happened in Austria, it's happened in Sweden, it's happened in Finland, and it's happened in Holland. And it hasn't yet happened in Ireland, but it will come. But I don't think that the route through this will be sort of organic political change. I think it will be political change forced by the people themselves.
And you can see that in the roiling crowds on the streets in Europe. They really are turning out, even in Greece. I mean, Denmark is very broken. But is it a feeling that you have, Eddie, that Ireland underneath then is really starting to wake up? That they may not be speaking out a lot yet, but that the Irish are person to person waking each other up? Because I'm not getting that feeling yet in New Zealand. A lot of people are awake, but there are still many who are just numbed off, traumatized by Ardern, eating terrible food, jabbed to up the wazoo, as we say down here in the Antipodes. It's so sad, and they are so deadened emotionally, and they are so deadened in their involvement with what's going on in their country. And we're being overrun by mass migration, not illegal migration. This government's opening its doors and saying, come in legally. And our roads and our hospitals are absolutely crowded. Our schools are crowded. They're bringing in up to 200,000 a year from India, many from India, from China. They're just ruining the country because we cannot cope with that amount of influx, just like Ireland. But
it's exactly the same here.
Yeah. So what's there? Are people waking up in vast?
Well, I think.
Ireland?
Well, people. If I could reframe your question, and it's like, how difficult is it for people to wake up? And then you come to a different conclusion. And it is with great difficulty, because they have to accept that I jabbed my children.
Yes.
I took the jab when I was pregnant.
Yes.
I didn't listen to my gut and my heart and the other people that gave me pause for thought, but I went and got jabbed anyway. And these are huge issues for people psychologically. So I think what we've got to do is, because of the way the media is, we have to bypass the media. I think social media has a role to play, but it's very much in echo chambers. So you have to break out of the echo chambers, and the only way you can do that is old-fashioned on the stump. You have to go and talk to people in groups, and then get other people to talk to other people, and just. Which is what I'm trying to start something to light a fire, but whether it takes off or not is really a question of timing. I don't know if the timing is good or bad at the moment to do that, but I feel that the Irish are pretty fed up with what's going on, because everybody can see in their extended family people getting turbo cancers, people getting their immune system seem to be at a very low ebb. They still haven't shaken off the cold they've had all winter. They've had several bouts of flu-like symptoms. Their cognitive function is diminished. It's not as sharp as it was, and they're not old. They've developed myocarditis, and they're young. And they know somebody in the immediate family that has turned up with late stage 3 or early stage 4 turbo cancer out of the blue, and it's renal or it's brain. I mean, they're all there. They're all the kind of personal experiences, but it does take individuals at the end of the day to take action and kick in the door in those groups, and that's what people have to do. Liz, I think I'm completely convinced by it that the only way through to all of this is to get people to take their courage to the sticking point and actually act, not just turn up, not just give likes out on social media, say I've done my bit today. You haven't, because you're not accepting your family and your community are in a state of war. The people that are engaged in that war against you are quite clear on it, but it's just you're not, and you're letting them in, and you need to take action. And if we can get that point out to people and encourage them to take that action, that resistance, that rejection, that dissent against totalitarianism. Well, that's the term I use because it's the correct term. People say globalist is too mild. It's far beyond just globalism, which is an economic philosophy. It's totalitarianism is behind all of this, self-preservation of the apex. And once people see that in more numbers, then it will be rejected. But we have to be frank and realistic with one another and know that there's not going to be any Hollywood moment where the people come out in masses and get got. It just doesn't work like that. You'll have to build it, and it will come. But why I'm so convinced about that is because at the end of the day, the human condition is not to accept slavery. People might invited in by accident or because of laziness or, lack of any kind of intellectual energy invested in checking something out, they might do all that. But at the end of the day, when the push comes to the shove, people will not allow their freedom to be taken away by them just for the sake of convenience. They just won't put up with it. And then you have to ask yourself, well, if that's the case, then, and the human race won't put up with it, and there'll be a counter-revolution or whatever you want to call it, to try and stop it. The question then we have to ask ourselves, well, why would the other side continue to do it then? Why would they continue on anyway? And the answer is, in Macbeth, to go back to your Shakespeare, they're steeped in blood so deep. In other words, they've crossed the river of blood so much, they may as well keep going, because to go back is actually harder than going forward. So they have to double down. That's why.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, I always thought Jacinda reminded me of one of the witches in Macbeth, actually. But will you be filming your talks?
Yes.
Because we would love to take them on FreeNZ Media. We can do a live cross if you can do it.
We'll do all that. Yeah, we'll be doing... Yeah, we're at the talks because you've a background in this. There's people don't understand who haven't done it. That there's an audio stream, there's a video stream, and then there's post-production. You have to put it all together. That takes a lot of work, and make sure that it's in a proper broadcastable product, and that's going to take a bit of time. So that has to be done post the event, and then I think within about a week or two of the first event, we should be able to get it out.
That's brilliant, Eddie, and we'll put those up on FreeNZ Media. It has, for me, just been an honour and a delight to talk to you across the ocean, but to feel such complicity, such closeness with a fellow warrior across the seas, and know that we are not alone in New Zealand. It's horrific here, it's horrific there, but I think what you were getting at before is the war of good and evil that we are in, that at some level, for me, Eddie, there is a spiritual dimension to this, my faith in God on those very long, dark nights when I have been in total despair and wanted to give up the fight and wondered why there is such suffering of others that I'm interviewing or even myself at times. I have always felt this presence saying, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am here, and that I will carry you through. Now, I can't speak for you, Eddie, but I felt you getting near to that. You know that this is, I think, a war of good and evil that we are in. And for me, good will always win over evil in the end. So the last word to you on that.
Well, I think that if I'm reading it correctly, I think that all of us, if you open yourself to it, will pick that up, on that level, meditation, whatever way you do it. It's there, and that's the first thing. The second thing is I'm doing something that you might find interesting. I've got a camera on the audience at these events, and I think that the audience reaction is more powerful than anything I will say on stage.
Wow!
At this moment, and but that's one of my plans, is to pick up the audience, zoom in on them, talk to them on the way in, talk to them on the way out, and that it's what the audience say will be the power of this thing, not what I say. Now, I'll deliver, because that's what I do. I'm built to do that, but it's the audience, and the reason for that is that people need to see there's large numbers there, and they're waking up. They're in the process of wake, or they're awake. And that there is actually large numbers of people that feel the way I feel, and that will give them an awful lot of courage.
So where can people come for your talks? The lucky people of Ireland. I wish I could fly over for them.
We're off then to just north of Dublin, just beyond Dublin Airport, in a place called City North Hotel on the 9th of April, and then finally on the 14th of May in the centre of Ireland at the Spring Hotel in Athlone, which is a bridge across the Shannon. Which, by the way, that castle was originally built by King John in and around the time that he was forced to sign the Magna Carta in 1215.
That's propitious. That's very, very important. Eddie, I really want to keep in touch with you and do a semi-regular update. I have absolutely loved our talk, and it's been an honor.
Good talking to you. Thank you very much, Liz. Thanks for giving me the time.
Good luck with your tour, Eddie. Thank you, Eddie Hobbs.
Thank you.